And it's time. So let's get going. If your destination is not the STIR working group, please disembark. Remind everyone that this is the note well. We now have this cool QR code on the slide. If you haven't read all the note well documents, you can find them behind that QR code. So please make sure you understand your responsibilities for contributing if you intend to contribute.
Also note that we all agreed to these procedures and conditions and such when we registered.
Or join the mail list.
Yes.
Okay, so please treat each other with respect. It's totally fine for you to disagree with an idea, but that doesn't mean you can attack the person with the idea. Please make sure you join the Medico. That is how attendance is taken. We will be using the Medico mic line for managing the discussion. So if you want to uh, speak, you raise your hand in the Medico, and then each in turn will get a chance to speak.
And please use Medico discipline. We do have some remote participants today. So I know no one here like John would forget to get in the queue before he gets to the microphone.
No one like John would do that. No. Yeah, yes, please speak to the mic so that the remote participants can hear you. So we have some documents that are with the RFC editor now. They're in one's being updated pending some input from the authors, and the other one is about to pop out because we actually know the RFC number for it. It's in Auth 48. There's the OCSP document is with the ISG, and the short-lived has finished working group last call, and we're waiting on the Shepherd write-up to send it to the ISG. And last meeting, we adopted the certificate transparency document. This is the agenda. It was sent to the list 2 weeks ago, at least. Are there any agenda bashes, or shall we proceed with this? And why is transcription not yet available?
Oh, one more thing. We wanted to everyone please thank Rob for taking notes for us.
Indeed. Thank you. All right. So I'm hearing no objections to this agenda or bashes to this agenda. So we're going to get going with that. So Mary, you're first.
Okay, can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. Okay. You know how this technology is sometimes. Okay, anyway, so I updated the, I have a biz for 8588, which is the shaken passport. And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. And I think it's actually the 01. I didn't submit 02, sorry.
You have slide control.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. All right. Okay, so these are the proposed updates for the RFC. So fixing the errata, if people remember the IET, the value for the IET field had quotes around it and it should not have quotes. And I did update the UUID reference. There is a new version of that one. And then it updated the ADDIS, oops, gosh, I'm not typing well, ADDIS 10,074 reference. Because the way ADDIS works, they only make available the latest version of a spec. And our documents, IETF documents should be referencing the version that was in effect at the time an RFC is published. So what I did is that for SIP Forum it's a joint activity at IPN&I group where this work comes from. And they're able to put, ADDIS documents on their website because of the agreement they have with ADDIS in terms of copyright and all that stuff. So that's what we did, was update that reference there. And that's pretty much the extent of the changes. I will say there was one suggestion, the UUID reference is actually recommended and not must or shall. And some people think that we should enforce that and make it a must. The problem is that wouldn't be backwards compatible at all, because I have seen UUIDs that actually have the service provider name in there, right? People are not necessarily using good practices. And it's been not clear to me. I think we originally thought, well, that might be good for traceback or something, right? A provider gets a traceback and they can look at the UUID they associated with that and try and figure out how that call got into their network. But I don't think it's being used for that. So I think we should just leave it as is. And I did review the document. I mean, I can make editorial changes because we can make editorial changes till the end of the day on every single document. I did not see anything in there that was unclear to me, but that's probably because I've worked with this stuff too long to actually be able. So if there's somebody that's read it more recently that thought, parts of it were unclear, we could go ahead and tidy that up now. But so those are all that I have to say, other than if we're ready, if people are okay with us, adopting this as a work group document and doing a 8588 biz.
There are thumbs up in the room.
Okay. All righty.
Are there any objections?
All right. Okay. And again, feedback from anybody that reads it. If there are things that aren't clear, it would be good to do it now, because I hope that we're done updating all these specs, right?
Is
So,
there any reason not to do a simultaneous call for adoption and working group last call?
I don't see any reason not to. So, yeah. So I can go ahead and submit the working group, version, and then if you guys want to start working group last call, that's fine with me.
All right, we'll do that.
Okay. Okay. Great, guys. Thank you.
Certificate of transparency is next, right? Is that what you expected to see?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to hold the microphone so it's close to my mouth.
It's a problem.
Yes, so this really, we did not have any updates going into this meeting because I think we had plenty of discussion leading up to adoption, but certainly willing to entertain any discussion here or on the list. But I think it's pretty straightforward and ready to go. So we don't have any additional things that we need to add to it. Since it's essentially a profile of the certificate transparency that exists today, and was even advised to keep it as close as possible. So I think it's ready to go for working group's last call.
Anyone have concerns with the last call on this document? Please read it.
Thank you. Couldn't help yourself.
No, I just, I hit the Q button. And it's not my fault that it's laggy or something. All right. Yes, I hit the queue. Now I'm out of the queue. The security consideration says to do still, things like that, right? Just consider that last call comment.
yes.
I guess the document clearly needs someone to actually finish some stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Good call out. We will do that henceforth.
So what I'm hearing is working group last call after you put some security considerations.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay.
We will do that very quickly. Maybe a good interim topic. Okay. We're done with that. Okay, Vesper. So, as we talked about before, and there is a bunch of things in here. This is really specifically about a framework to bind TNs, using delegate certificates, authority tokens, transparency, which we just discussed, but use all the tools that we've built over time. I have a few additions to talk about. Even though the document is long, as I've just heard, we did focus and simplify, as discussed in the last meeting. Make sure we stick to delegate certificates, focus on that, short-lived certs, the use of transparency. I do have two new things I wanted to talk about and consider as a group. I will detail those. But to be clear, I think the themes that we're trying to bring together in this document is the use of authority tokens, both TN auth list and JWT claim constraints. Make sure we have text to detail how they should be used and those things. Obviously, using delegate certificates with TN level TN auth list. The use of transparency as an ecosystem assurance and accountability model. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And then I added connected identity because I think that's an important thing that we've defined in this group, and we need a potential path forward to utilizing that. The authority tokens, I'm not going to go through all the detail here unless we want to have discussions about it. One thing to note here in the ACME group, if you did not attend or weren't aware, the JWT claim constraints authority token draft was adopted. Hopefully should have a short path to adoption, but I think as we've discussed before, that's a straightforward win there. Delegate cert issuance, the use of both authority tokens to encapsulate both of the extensions and the certificates, discussing some of the things you should be doing there, use of ACME challenges in the case of when you're using ACME, the use of short-lived delegate certificates, and then the transparency log submission and inclusion of SET receipt in the certificate itself. Adopting the 8224 authentication service and verification service. Pretty much straightforward, not a lot new there other than reinforcing making sure you're doing the things you should be doing for JWT claim constraints, associating the telephone number, use of short-lived certs and X5C, and all the validation of those things, including the SET inclusion and the new things we introduced with certificate transparency. I mentioned connected identity, so and this is probably a good discussion to get into, use of RSP passport. Should that also be signed by a delegate certificate? Is there rules around that? I think that would be a great topic to have more discussion about, and some of the constraints that may apply there. Another topic I'd love to have more discussion about, because the RCD draft actually, or the RFC now, talks about the integrity hash and maybe puts privacy properties. and thinking about inclusion of the hash that's part of the integrity, um, there is potential to guess values. So including a way of potentially salting is something. So I just wanted to cover like making sure we're covering what the actual privacy properties are or any of those things and be more complete there. John, you have a comment?
Yeah, John, I think for both of these things, there's kind of, yeah, a fundamental requirements question that I think is begged by them. So, I
Right.
mean, for the connected identity one, for example, what really do we imagine the use case for Vesper is? Is it more or less always a use case where an enterprise is contacting a consumer, and that the information that the enterprise might be interested in getting from connected identity in that case would be that it reached the right consumer?
Right.
Or if we imagine the flow is reversed, there are cases where a consumer is calling the enterprise and they want to use Vesper-like structures to be able to prove who it is that they've actually reached, in this case, connected identity, right?
Right. Right.
And so, I mean, I think we need to start with what the use cases are that we think this is supposed to satisfy.
Sure.
And the same is true, and I have had a lot of concerns about this every time you bring it up, with the privacy
Right.
constraints that have been proposed for the information that be carried with Vesper. I don't
course.
understand what the threat model is. I don't understand what you're trying to keep private and from whom, and how it gets disclosed to the people that need to have it. And I think there need to be, I mean, these are all, I'm sure, mechanisms that'll work to achieve certain aims like that, but I don't even understand what the threat model is.
Sure, and we can talk to that. I think there isn't just B2C and C2B use cases, but there's also valid B2B use cases where a business is contacting another business and they need to prove to each other. So yes, I agree. We should make sure we all understand what the use cases are for that. And, beyond just having the connected identity draft, I think it's a good conversation to have for sure. Equally, I think part of the justification for being able to distribute a certificate with a set of constraints that you may or may not want to disclose the claims, but still prove that to the relying party, I think is the use case. But we can certainly have the conversation about whether that's a valid use case or not.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a little more specific than that. I think it needs to be down to what is the threat that we imagine. What information is going to get revealed that is going to be actionable if we don't have this mechanism, and how is that going to be exploited? Like, why do I care? Is what
Right.
this comes down to. And it seems like in systems that are RCD adjacent anyway, where we're trying to project information to increase the confidence, right, if the callee, of the authenticity of the call, like the need to restrain some of that information, or withhold it from people depending on whom it reaches, because that is really
Right.
what these cryptographic tools will do, right?
Right.
And so I mean, there are ways to do that. Some of the, if it is a very rare use case where this would ever matter, if mostly we do C2B, and but for some C2C cases, there's like additional information that should be exposed, or in the B2B case, there's additional information that should be exposed, right?
Right.
Like you can always have a layer of indirection. There's just a URL or something that you can go access, and that has its own security properties, that has its own authentication, or like something else like that, rather than like baking it into this. So I guess, what it really comes down to, again, is the stuff that we put in passports usually is supposed to be actionable at the time that like the phone is ringing, right? And if there's other information that needs to be projected, that like I want to understand why it is actionable at the time the phone is ringing, like
Yep.
for a B2B case.
Right.
And if it needs to be like semi-private like this, yeah, that would be the kind of threat model I think would be compelling, or at least the kind of story about this would be compelling, is like, here's why this needs to be available like before somebody decides to pick up the call.
Right.
And isn't just something that is part of some subsequent transaction where you can have your own like security.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thought was following sort of the requirements that we have as from a telephone perspective of having anonymous or privacy calls and things like that, but with the layer of there's vetted information that you may or may not want to disclose. I'm happy to detail those more on why that's important, but John is wrinkling his nose. We will note that. Yeah, yeah, let them in. Okay. So this is the other new thing that wanted to introduce related to having the ability to connect to the party that's behind the calling party that's connected to the passport, the certificate and passport that's signed in the call, is a more explicit connection to their business identity. This also has to do with the transparency to the ecosystem, the vetting, and starting to introduce those things at the protocol level. John, I'm sure you have lots of opinions here.
I also have lots of opinions about this one. Yeah. So, wow, I hadn't actually ever looked at Spice before today when I was looking at the new stuff that's in this. And
Yep.
It's interesting. It's a tough problem. And you can see some of the things that they kind of fork out to from Spice, like Dun& Bradstreet and things like that, to get like enterprise identifiers and the way that that would all be structured for this.
Right.
Once again, I mean, I think we would need to do some sort of requirements process to ascertain what we think for telephone industry makes sense for that. And in particular, what kind of information, again, that is salient to the decisions that are made about accepting like real-time communications, right? And I mean, so part of this is, yeah, we can have a lot of data that's available. And at the end of the day, the user is going to see a check mark and maybe a name and a logo, right? And so I'm presuming that you envision all this stuff is going to be used behind the scenes by something that either exists in the terminating network operators, like RM intelligence, or maybe in the handsets intelligence, that's going to be parsing the Spice stuff and be looking at Dun & Bradstreet, making decisions about this, right?
Well,
if not, then this doesn't belong in a passport.
This is more about the establishment of trust and transparency through transparency mechanisms, so that when you issue a delegate certificate, there is some connectivity back to
Yeah.
who the actual
Yeah,
calling party
yeah.
is, and it can be
So
part of a
compared to
trace
EV,
back
compared to
mechanism.
extended validation, right? And I don't
Mhm.
know, Russ, if you follow this at all, or like, is anybody in Spice looking at EV versus like? So I mean, again, the point is, if you're looking at it from the cert level, then okay, there are people who've looked forever at expensive ways to validate exactly who it is that's behind a cert. And you know, if we need is a requirements process that is going to look at the needs for delegate cert specific to our use case. And I'm just from my initial glance at Spice, I'm not immediately persuaded that that's the right way of carving this up with the glue URNs. But like, because there just are other ways that people have looked at this that it might turn out to be sufficient, or it might turn out none of this is sufficient. We need something that's really specific to the way the telephone industry works.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the bigger KYC, KYB conversation of like, how do we tie these things together? There's been a number of conversations about various identifiers and whether there's one to rule them all, or if there's, I think Glue provides a more realistic representation that you may be associated with multiple IDs or jurisdictional IDs or other things like
Locations,
that.
Or there's a ton of just stuff like that in Glue, like which
Right.
corporate branch is this and which place, and is that salient to
But
again to what is going to end up being rendered through some sort of UI to a user? At least it's going to be just make them trust the call more. And like that's I guess the kind of stuff I want to understand about what you think this validation process is and how that relates to the user experience of, because I don't know where Bank of America's branch is that's calling me. I care if it's Bank of America, right? Like in a telephone call context. If we're registering somebody for a cert, like and determining whether a delegate cert should be issued to someone, maybe there are use cases where it's actually set, but it's not. But the point is that does not trickle down to the actual stuff that gets processed in a call that helps people make decisions about answering the call or not.
I think the thing to reconcile here is not just the real-time verification at the call level, it's the establishment of the certificate as a representation of the calling party. and how to uniquely tie them back to that so that it can be trusted in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you were in before, so.
This has been Campbell pretending to be from the floor. I just going to comment on what John was just saying about what you render to the user so they can make a answer, don't answer, or whatever sort of decision. As of a few months ago, most of my calls are now answered by an agent on my phone.
Okay.
And I wonder if the agents need the same information that humans do. They can probably process more information than humans can.
This is fair. I mean, this is obviously all AIs are going to be calling other AIs within the next year, and like all the work we're doing here is being irrelevant. So we're just getting a summary, a transcription will appear in our watches. But
They'll be read by another AI.
yeah, I mean, so it's not that I don't appreciate, Chris, what you're saying, that there's aspects of this that are specific to the way that certs are generated versus the way passports are generated or the way certs are distributed. But like I said, that this is a studied problem, and there are a bunch of different tacks on this I think people have taken. And just off the top of my head, I'm not sure this is, the right one, or but maybe it is. I don't know. But from the stuff I
Well-
looked at in Glue, it didn't seem like it had a lot of corollaries.
Well, I
to-
think the SPICE working group is looking at a bunch of these things and, in the form of tokens and other things. And yeah, maybe Ori can comment, but it would be nice to take advantage of that into the STIR certificate world.
Is this stuff for real? Security people here?
Hi, Ori Steele, as one of the guys that helped get Spice off the ground before becoming your AD. So this space of like assertion graph credential formats is a space I've worked in for a really long time. Did a lot of work in the W3C around it. The general idea behind like these entity identifiers you see here is that people build assertion graphs that are about relationships between legal entities, assertions legal entities are making about subjects such as telephone numbers. And the idea is that they're supposed to be machine processable so that you can enforce policy in an automated fashion. So Ben, to your point on like, what will the agent do with, a globally unique identifier for the legal entity that is calling from this given phone number? It might do a quick knowledge graph lookup. It might find product catalog information. The whole reason that people sign these graph structures is because some software system is going to process pieces of that graph structure in an automated way to try and build facilitation benefits, enablement, other kinds of features. And from a practical standpoint, all of these, identifiers are either like a node in a graph or an attribute on an edge in the graph. So the JWT claims registry is like giving you different well-known attributes that go on the edges in the graph. The subject identifier is a node identifier in the graph. The issuer identifier is a node in the graph. That's what that's what SPICE is about. Whether that's relevant to your use cases here or whether there's a willingness to implement adding those attributes into your existing token formats is, I think, a thing that, no hat on here. This group should figure out which of these properties are actually needed for your use cases. And John, you're like 100% right on the use cases part of this. This is, I think, the third or fourth presentation. I've seen like the same presentation every time I come to serve for this. And I think you should really, think about what are the use cases that you're solving and how does adding additional attributes or additional disclosure capabilities into those tokens, what properties does that give, and who's willing to do the work to add that stuff, because it's not free to add additional cryptographic operations, lookup,
right,
or transparency pieces. And one other thought about this is like, why is the credential format always tied to transparency in this? You can do selective disclosure without transparency. So I don't understand why those two things are always coupled together. And I think you might find that the use cases for transparency are different than the use cases for selective disclosure. Maybe there's more use cases for selective disclosure, or maybe there's more use cases for transparency, but coupling them together is giving, if you guys aren't attending the SPICE group, you probably aren't holding on to the information you need to evaluate whether these are the properties that you need. Anyway, I've said a lot at the mic here. As an
So,
individual, I'm
yes.
stepping down.
So I did bring up selective disclosure and sort of got pushed down from going that direction. And
Here's a requirement. Let's discuss it.
but I mean, in general, there is a huge industry discussion on KYC, KYB, and how is that represented in, and how do we bring that back to some sort of cryptographic form of tying that to the certificate or whatever we use to represent the calling party. So those are the connectivities I'm trying to make. I'm open to other paths forward, but I want to have the discussion about how we get there.
Yeah. So John, again, just a couple more things on this. That was very helpful. Thank you. I mean, I can imagine, for example, there being a knowledge graph that maps the set of originating telephone numbers that are legitimate for this like calling enterprise, and that being something that like an agent could utilize, like that would be very obvious on the, even your handset could do that without fancy AI agents or something like that. But of course, we have other ways to do that because the things that we need, we developed other ways to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have like the concept that you can have telephone numbers by ref; they're valid for a certificate in it. But I mean, I think the main reason I got back up was actually just to say this, that like, so if all this stuff is more salient to the issuance of certs, why is it a passport claim? Like, what is, again, that's the part, if it's, I mean, it should be
Because
baked into the cert if it is relevant to the issuance of the cert. It should be an extension,
So-
like Tianopoulos says, to the delegate cert itself. And
That-
that's the way that it should be projected. Why is it in the passport?
so yes, the connectivity was to have it as a claim that you could constrain. If we want to make a specific extension that defines this, I'm happy to do that as well.
Well, I mean, obviously, an entity ID like this and all the remainder of the glue factor is the name, the domain. I mean, these are all things in X509, the name and domain are. Entity IDs are a ton of different ways that would be represented in X509. And so, like, but I just don't see why it'd be replicated in the passport or why you'd use claim constraints for that. Again, unless, because I think this is much more salient to passport issuance, or I'm sorry, certificate issuance, it is to passport creation on a per call basis, right? Like, these are invariant on a per call basis, I assume.
Yes,
If
and
so, they shouldn't be in a passport. They should be in the cert.
sure. I'm not saying that this has to be the final form, but we do need some object that represents these things. But I do think this is sort of the crux of some of the things that follow the industry discussion. Others are proposing other ways of doing this. I would love to have the discussion in this group and how we do it in a more global way.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
You can talk while you're waiting.
I know. So it's not, Chris, of course, I'm not like highly sensitive to that component of this. And, Chris is being a little oblique about it. I mean, obviously, there's a bit of a food fight at a regulatory level and an industry level at the moment about, who should have the keys to KYC and what the conditions should be for it. My position to Chris has been for some time now that here at the IETF, we're not in the business of doing policies at that forum. We're in the business of making sprockets, and our job is to create sprockets that will have the maximal application to the potential policies that are going to end up being applied outside of it. So as much as I wish I could endorse what you're saying, and the discussion about which it should be here. And I think we can create some things that are going to support what we think are useful possibilities of this for the industry, but we're not here to decide how this is going to work in France or Brazil, let alone the US, right?
Yes, and I recognize that, and I do want to build the sprocket that allows us to do this and not set policies. And I'm totally with you and totally understand. I've been through that discussion many times, obviously. So that is the intent, that we're building the sprocket that allows us to do that, which may lead to another discussion on sprockets. So that covers Vesper. Any last discussion? I'll just quickly go through out of band. I think we all, or most of us that have been participating, understand out of it. Ben?
Before you do that, I'm going to
Sure.
jump in as chair. we have been talking about Vesper as our AD just hinted at for a long time, and it seems like we're kind of spinning. And I would like to see some discussion about what's here that we could actually adopt and work on. Whether that's the whole thing, whether we need to break it up, I don't know the answers to any of that. But I think we need to start moving the discussion in that direction. Is what are we going to work on and stir? What belongs somewhere else, maybe IPNNI or some
Mhm.
other more policy oriented or architecture oriented groups.
Yep.
I'm not saying stop and don't talk about out of bounds yet. I'm just saying these are things I would really like to see us close down by. I would love to see us have some visibility into that by the next time we have this conversation.
That's an excellent point, and I wholeheartedly agree. And as I've been reminded, looking at use cases and requirements, I think the industry discussions are maturing enough to get to the point where those are becoming much more clear. Um, I've certainly gotten a lot of feedback along those lines, so it would be good to have a discussion of like how we frame this. John and I were having the conversation before this, like this is meant to be potentially an informative framework to take all the tools that we have in STIR and make sure we sort of have the glue that demonstrates, how these tools should work together or things like that.
And one comment to that is, of course, I think the IESG changes their opinion on this sort of thing on a regular basis, but we can adopt documents that we may never publish.
Mhm.
I mean, we can take on a work to say, okay, here's the use cases we're going to work on, and then that's just an internal document that we use. So
Right.
it's one thing to think about when we think about what documents we're going to really work on.
Yes. That's my goal at the end of the day, that we work on this. I want to have the
Oh,
discussions.
triggered the area director.
Go ahead, Ori.
Hi, Ori Steele. Now with hat on as your AD, I would prefer that you not adopt a protocol document with the intention of just discussing it. If you do, I think John's behind me probably to say this, but like if you do want to explore the space of additional cryptographic mechanisms for improving the value of passport tokens, or evaluating what new fields should go in a cert versus what should go in a passport token, use case documents around that explore where to put the bits in the passport or in the cert to enable more secure, transparent, traceable business practices, to add new features. That a use case document like that would make a bunch of sense. A protocol document to just sort of talk about machinery and security bits. Like please don't try to do that while I'm AD.
To be clear, I was talking about use case documents.
Yeah, I mean, so concrete proposal wise, I mean, this is a charter discussion we're having, whether we like it or not, right? So, I mean, I think what we need to decide is, do we want to take on in the charter of this working group? And we could, I think we could probably post some language. It might be a little bit different than what Ori was just suggesting, but about, providing tools to project policies for, the distribution of enterprise certificates, or whatever we want to talk about in connection with that. And, using that to in turn get better outcomes for, C2C and C2B cases, however we want to put that.
Right.
Like, I think we write something like that up and bounce that up to Ori, and but I think I would again start from requirements, use cases, because I still think there's lots of security properties of this that I don't understand, and that's fundamentally the tough part of this. So I'm happy to help with that, if we want to try to do it. But I also recognize, as you said, there's a lot of industry forces around this going around, and I'm not, so I think actually doing the use cases and the requirements would be in some ways as helpful as doing the protocol. I guess would be the way I'd put it
Mhm.
to that. because that's really the argument for why solutions should exist in a particular
Well,
set of guardrails, right?
and I fundamentally agree because we want this to be the sort of framework that uses the tools that we've been building over the past many years, right? Just make sure it comes together with the current set of industry discussions around tying it to business
I
entities.
could
and
basically,
things.
I could basically get behind that, doing a document that was intended to do the use cases and the framework for this enough that we could say any solutions to this, no matter where they are, should have the following properties, right?
Mhm.
And like having IETF consensus for a statement like that, I mean, I would even, you know, I don't know if we want to go for like BCP, but I could imagine getting to a point where we understood that well enough to go to BCP.
Quick interrupt. There are 5 minutes left in this slot on the agenda. We might have a few minutes for a little bit of slop, but not too much, and we still have Rob stuff to talk about. So
Right. So I think I can pretty quickly go through this. We're not necessarily proposing anything new. Actually, the things Rob's going to talk about are probably the newest thing. But the idea is that we use out of band not only to do the original intention of out of band, but I've added text to also support connected identity to this as well. So maybe I have the clicker. So right now, the way the document was formed was adopting ADIS 10,000, or sorry, 1,105 mechanism that's out there, adding some additional API endpoints for connected identity. John and I were also talking before this, like some of the security properties we should definitely take a look at and make sure we're doing all the things that we talked about in the RFC. And I think that would also be a great discussion to have. John is getting to the mic.
And just to speak there, I mean, so a lot of those refer to the ADIS 10.105 as well, right? Like the post and the get there, the structure of those URLs. I think those have security problems. Like if that's what's in the 10.105, I don't know if it is or not. Or that health thing.
The UUID is new
no,
because
up in the required above.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
That
where it
is
has dest.org. Like for example,
correct.
that is something I think has very serious security problems. And so
Well, and I think this is a good forum to make sure
Right.
that the security properties are proper
is that
there.
baked into whatever this ADIS 10.105 is?
Yes,
Is that
the
Alex
top-
document or is that something else?
That is the NIPCA ADIS approved spec. Yes.
For OB.
Yeah, the top three are essentially
Yeah,
the API
We're not
endpoints.
going to do that here. I can tell you that.
Well, I think that would be a great discussion point. Yeah. So I think I got a clear message on use case and requirements, which I agree with, and I'm happy to get there. I think a lot of this was sort of a journey to get to what those use cases should be. So I think I'll close with that and promise to bring back use cases. And John, I'll reach out to you and others that are interested in working on that. Certainly contact me. Ori.
I or Steele as your responsible AD. I think John or other folks in the room have said it, like the charter piece. You know, I've reviewed the charter, you know, sitting here, listening with you all, and like I feel like it really would be nice to tighten up the charter, modernize it, make it shorter and more concise, and maybe even specify a couple documents as, you know, known deliverables so that we don't as we go through the chartering process, open a giant can of worms where, you know, for example, age verification over phone shows up in this, right? So like I'm like a little bit uncomfortable with just diving right into a requirements document without a tighter charter in place. So I would love to see discussion of that. On the list, chairs. If you can help coordinate around that, happy to support however I can. But I would be careful just going straight from this protocol document to a use cases document without pausing for a bit to look at a charter.
Can can we talk about what that process would look like? Just so I'm
Do it on the mail list.
on the mail list. Okay. Great. All right, I'll hand it over to Rob. Given the context of the conversation, but I think it's good to review those documents in either case.
And I'll point out, Rob is also our esteemed note taker. So if there's anyone that can maybe jump in and spell him while he's at the front of the room, it would be really nice. Maybe Chris.
Delegate certificate. Okay, so this is
Delegates are-
yeah. So this is actually probably gonna be. What am I doing wrong?
I know you don't have control again.
Ah.
There it is. Takes too many clicks.
Okay. So two drafts. They're very simple continuation kind
You
of.
have to talk to them.
Two drafts, they are quite simple continuation of the OOB discussion, and they are, inspired by RFC 8816. And the first one is basically proposal to add a optional extension with URIs of the CPS for, the OOB servers, and because it's an optional extension, it would be backwards compatible. It would not break anything, and obviously it can be put into certificates and delegate certificates. And I think it's provides some interesting discovery capabilities, especially in a delegate certificate world. And that's it for this one. It's very simple. There were some comments already in a mail list to change the CPS to OOB in the field. So already pushed that, and there's some minor comments also that we still need to push.
Obviously, I should be more helpful on the list about these things, but as I've expressed to you, prior to this meeting, I'm concerned actually about the overall model of having the certificate determine where the CPS is. Something we considered. As you pointed out, was one of the things we listed in a long laundry list in 8816. We were going to do it. I suspect there are existing fields in X509 that can contain URLs that you can point out to that we probably don't need to develop something new from it. But it's much more, again, about the privacy and security model of all of this. Just like my comments about having both the dest and the orig in the URL that you're sending to CPS, it's all about what data collection do you expect is going to happen in what points of the architecture. And if you're allowing basically the CAs to determine what the CPSs are going to be, that's different than if you're allowing the originating provider to do it, then reverse the terminating provider, and like where the flows go as a result of that. Have all these different privacy implications that are built in though to this, right? Because you're staging it in the CPS, that's where or in the cert, that's where the discovery of the CPS is. That is creating some implications on all the security questions. You need to take it back to requirements. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for comment. So are you suggesting that in this document we should have those use cases spelled out, or
No, I'm suggesting that this document is probably premature because until we understand more broadly in the architecture who we think should determine what the CPS is going to be on, potentially a per call basis, then we'll understand whether the right place for there to be an extension that's going to point to the CPS is the cert or not.
Okay.
And I just added myself to the queue real quick. I don't know we're the ones that get to decide who decides where the CPS is going to be. And there's different industry organizations that are doing. I mean, Addis is doing something completely that would not work with this. And I'm sure there's other groups doing other things.
Okay. Thank you for comments. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Sean Turner. One other thing is that sometimes the CPSs aren't actually fully published. So it's kind of
Wrong.
So in
He-
Addis,
he
they're
is
always
not
going to.
talk. He's talking about the call placement service.
Okay, sorry.
Not the certificate practices statement.
Yeah, I am not taking credit for the acronym. I'm just joking. Okay. Next one.
You've
Uh,
got the clicker.
no, I was just waiting if I can proceed. So this is basically a STICT log related thing, and it's kind of follow up on the idea that if they are or would be in delegate certificates or delegate certificates, or basically certificates that you put on a log, then it's kind of natural that monitors could actually extract those and then create a cache for you to look it up, which we kind of already touched, but like, I'll let John talk.
Yeah, I know. We've got like 10 minutes left, I think, so I can still get up here and pontificate, right? Is there anything after this, or is this it?
This is it. We have
Okay.
something else, but we don't know. So yeah, this is it.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say about this. So the reason ultimately we did not do this in 8816 was because of the discovery problem, in the sense of, there's a chicken and egg problem. If you need to be able to access the CPS in order to learn what the cert is by looking in the X5 view, it's not really going to help you if that's where you put like your URL that points to the CPS. So you're solving that by saying instead it's the CT system that's going to like push effectively every certificate that exists in the ecosystem, like down to verification services and relying parties. They'll use those to find CPSs as they need to, either in the originating or terminating side. Doesn't really matter for this architecture which. Obviously, I think there are other ways to do that or to accomplish that. I mean, especially in an ecosystem that has as few certificates as like Shaken does. I almost wonder why we even have like CRLs and instead don't just push every cert down to every verification service, like for Shaken. It would make more sense probably than the existing system does for that. But I understand that this kind of becomes a surrogate for that effectively, right? That you end up with a system where it's the log that actually, and because you anticipate that with delegate certificates, you'll have many more certificates in the architecture being issued by SEAs, then it grows so much that you need something like this to do it. But there's no free lunch. It ultimately amounts to the same thing. You're pushing every certificate right down to the relying parties. And so if that is a bridge too far for just pushing everything and Shaken down, then it doesn't change just say that it's CT now, and therefore it works where it wouldn't work the other way.
So let's use certificate transparency to push all the certs down to the.
Well, yeah, that's what it said. But
Right.
Yeah, I think we agree on the premise. It's again a matter of what the right mechanism is to use that.
Sorry, my argument was a bit of a reductio there. It was saying that this is equivalent to just pushing all the certs down, right, to every verification service, which you could do. But if it's too much of a hassle to do that, like when you introduce delegate certs, wrapping CT around it does not change that. It actually is bigger than just pushing all the certs down is. And so, I mean, it's, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It may help for other reasons. And I was talking to Barnes the other day, since we've got so much time left, about, that stuff that was going on this week. Russ, what was that cool thing where you're going to replace the entire WebPI with a Merkle tree? Plants, thank you. About that plant stuff, I was like, man, we could just do that, right, for stir. I'm sure somebody's going to be asking us to do that for stir in like 10 minutes. So if we're going to do CT, why don't we just do that? Yeah, I know it's not in our charter. Is this in our charter? Yeah, fair enough. It's a ledger that somebody's going to push. But like my point is that ledger is going to be larger than the aggregate of the certificates, right? But I mean, I'm asking this like, I don't know much about Spice and its maturity, like compared to other things that, are out there in the industry around this. But, if plants is like where we should be skating towards that puck, should we be skating towards that puck?
Post quantum is the question,
I guess I
John.
still am.
I've gotten asked about that already in the industry forum.
So yeah, I think we should have that conversation. Obviously, there's a time and a place to adopt new things, and like when do you pick to not wait till the next thing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to adopt some of the new things. That obviously the problem space is not that different from some of the other things being discussed. So if we want to consider those things, we certainly should. But I think we also picked a lane for STI certificates, and we're sort of down that road. So yeah, when do we deviate, and when do we adopt new things, and when do we? That's certainly a discussion to have for sure.
5-minute warning, so
yeah,
please
so
keep your
be quick.
comment short.
So, the chair of the plants BOF was up there. I went to the thing. The overriding one of the pushes is PQ. So if we're going to start talking about PQ signatures here, then so I know they are, because it's like, well, that's where the cool kids are doing, right? So why aren't we doing that? And so I think that we have to be like, we don't really have a need to push for that at this point. Like we're good where we are. When you say we've got to go, PQ signatures, then we can start thinking about that. But till then,
I thought you were one of the cool kids.
I only know the cool kids. Beard is way too long and white.
You're exactly asking the right question, Ari, which is like, because passports are so short-lived, like the PQ implications of these are relevant.
Exactly.
This is what I've said to every interview that's asked me about it.
That's why I said it was a question. Stop.
All right, that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Russ was responding to a taunt from the other chair, not the speaker. Sorry, sorry,
Oh, I'm
Rob.
sorry. Yes. I was responding to the smart aleck comment from my co-chair. All right. So I took a couple action items. The first is that Stir Cert transparency is going to get updated with security considerations. And then once it's posted, we'll do a working group last call. And the second note is it's time to recharter. Let's discuss what deliverables we want in the new charter on the mail list. If that is not a fruitful and quickly converging topic, then we will have an interim focused on recharter.
One more action item. We had the action item to adopt Mary's biz draft. I forget the number. And then look at working group last calling that possibly at the same time.
Yes, you're correct. I should write that down. It was 8588 bis.
We have 2 minutes for any other business.
Plenary's next after the break. Thank you. Hey, Joe, you and John come up. Ben and I are going to go grab a beer before plenary if you want to join us.
The important stuff. Are you dropping your bag off?
No.